Lawmakers are scrambling to avert a partial federal government shutdown that's set to begin tomorrow night. And a French court has convicted about 50 men of raping a woman over the course of a decade. Good afternoon. I'm Corva Coleman from NPR News, and here are today's top stories. Congress has until tomorrow night to approve a short-term spending bill to avert a partial shutdown of the federal government. House Republicans have rejected a spending bill that had won bipartisan support this week. But NPR's Barbara Sprunt reports President-elect Trump demanded that GOP lawmakers abandon it.
After intense pressure from billionaire advisor Elon Musk, President-elect Trump and Vice President-elect J.D. Vance are calling on Republicans to reject the bill. The short-term measure includes over $100 billion towards disaster aid and farm subsidies, among other things. In a statement, Trump and Vance called for a bill they say doesn't include any legislative wins for Democrats. This leaves Republicans scrambling to keep the government open, right as Congress is also prepping to go home for the holidays. Barbara Sprunt, NPR News, the Capitol.
Members of the Conservative Freedom Caucus have expressed frustration with House Speaker Mike Johnson's management of the bill. Caucus Chair, Maryland GOP Congressman Andy Harris, spoke to MSNBC.
Well, I don't know. I'm only one vote out of 220. Look, I think the Speaker could have handled this differently. At this point, I'm still supportive of the Speaker, but I will tell you that voices both inside the House Freedom Caucus and outside the Freedom Caucus have been very disappointed at what's happened this week.
The failed government spending bill was supposed to provide disaster relief to many states suffering from hurricane damage this year. Workers at 7 Amazon facilities have gone on strike this morning. The Teamsters Union says they're demanding that the online retailer come to the bargaining table and hash out contracts. They're on picket lines from New York to Los Angeles. Amazon has released a statement saying the Teamsters Union does not represent its workers and that the union is pushing a false narrative. The strikes come less than a week before Christmas and Hanukkah. A court in France has convicted nearly 50 men for rape. A man drugged his then-wife and then invited strangers to rape her while she was unconscious. He then recorded the sexual assaults over more than a decade. The French court has sentenced him to the maximum 20 years in prison. The woman, Gisèle Pellicot, waived her right to anonymity in the case. She has been in the French courtroom for weeks demanding justice. After the verdicts today, she spoke publicly.
C'est avec une profonde émotion que je m'exprime aujourd'hui devant vous.
Speaking in French, Pellicot said that this had been a difficult trial and that she was thinking of her children and her grandchildren. Pellicot also called for a better future where women and men can live together in mutual respect. French President Emmanuel Macron is on the French territorial island of Mayotte. It has been wrecked by a cyclone that later made landfall in eastern Africa. The French president is asking European partners for relief supplies. At least 22 people have been killed by the storm, but it's feared that hundreds may have perished. The UN Migration Agency says 100,000 refugees have returned to Syria from neighboring countries. That's since rebel groups overthrew Syria's dictator, Bashar al-Assad. NPR's Fatma Tanis reports from Istanbul.
Half of Syria's population was displaced from their homes during 14 years of civil war. Millions of them became refugees abroad, and now many want to return home. The International Organization for Migration estimates that 1 million people will return to Syria between January and June of 2025. Most of the 100,000 who already returned home came from neighboring Lebanon. Some 7,000 refugees have also returned from Turkey, which hosts the largest number of Syrians in the world, more than 3 million. But the UN agency also urged caution over a sudden, large-scale return of refugees, saying the system in Syria is fragile and won't bear the influx. Fatma Tanis, NPR News, Istanbul.
In a little more than a week, researchers on the U.S. East Coast have discovered 3 right whales that are entangled. Right whales are critically endangered. From member station WCAI, Eve Zukoff reports there are fewer than 400 of them left.
The first whale, an adult female, was seen off the coast of Massachusetts with ropes trailing from her mouth halfway down her body. Officials say she's in better shape than a young male seen in the same area, with fishing lines wrapping his head and back. Another male off the coast of North Carolina is entangled and unable to open his mouth to feed. Scott Landry with the Center for Coastal Studies says researchers are not surprised to see 3 injured whales in such a short period.
The harder we work at finding whales, the more we're going to discover.
Landry says a national disentanglement network is ready to free the whales if they're seen again and weather permits. For NPR News, I'm Eve Zukoff.
Reuters news service says oil from damaged oil tankers in the Black Sea has now fouled several miles of the shoreline. Volunteers are cleaning the beaches. 2 Russian oil tankers were damaged in stormy weather last weekend as they sailed the Kerch Strait. That's between Russia and Crimea, the region that Russia annexed. A New York man who was gardening in his yard earlier this year found 2 giant teeth from an ancient mastodon. Researchers who checked it out then discovered an entire mastodon jawbone. They say now they're looking for more. I'm Corva Coleman, NPR News.